Tewolde, and this is Making the Case. All right, today, prosecutors in R. Kelly's racketeering and sex trafficking trial focused heavily on the role his employees played in helping him run what they claim was a criminal enterprise. The accounts of these employees are key in proving that crimes were committed, but not all of the testimony from today benefits the prosecution. Back with me for another night to talk more about today's developments is veteran prosecutor and BNC's legal contributor, Paul Henderson. All right, Paul. So we heard from R. Kelly's former personal assistant. She backed up some of the accuser's claims, but she also said she never witnessed Kelly with any underage girls and never witnessed any abuse. Will this help R. Kelly's defense?
It absolutely will. That's testimony on the record that I guarantee the defense is going to raise when they make their case. They're going to probably use an exact quote from her on those two issues. And they're going to indicate to make sure that we know and are aware that this is someone that knew him and was familiar with him and his work behavior. But again, it was a mixed bag. The prosecution did score some points by having her talk about what she was familiar with, and it's going to be consistent with some of the other information and testimony that we heard in the past few weeks about the many rules he had and the very specific directions that he gave about them in terms of the rules that both the employees had to follow and in terms of what the women around him, the young men and women around him, had to do in order to define the criminal enterprise of illegal behavior. And so when you see on the board where they're talking about punishment being real, this is punishment both for the alleged victims and for the employees. And she talked about all of the ways that he enforced those rules and gave those directions. And this was corroborated, that there was yelling, that there was pay that would be docked for them to do their rules. And this was part of the power and control and authority that he exerted over people, but it was him doing it, right? So this is, for a criminal trial, it's always about the culpability of the principal, and he is the principal. So these rules are important. The tight directions are important, both for the employees and for the alleged victims in this case. And that's why prosecution had to put this person on the stand. And not for nothing, but I think we need to pay attention to part of why this person indicated that they might not have been aware that anybody was underage, and they might not have been aware that there was any abuse going on, was because this person doesn't want to be personally liable after this trial is finished, independent of the liability for federal charges, but at state charges and for civil charges. And so that's really important too. And this person did play a key role and affirmed a lot of the previous testimonies from other victims by saying that she was the one that was organizing all of their travel and telling them some of the weird rules that we were hearing about how they were supposed to interact with other people and with R. Kelly, because she did testify about that. And that's part of the reason why prosecution had to put her on and wanted her testimony as part of their evidence.
Now, unlike the personal assistant, testimony from another employee, Nicholas, seemed to claim the opposite, that Kelly always seemed to be in the company of young girls. He also said that he quit because it was a hostile work environment and he wasn't comfortable with what he was witnessing. Now, both his and the former assistant's testimony can be true, right? But can it hurt the defense?
Well, I think it hurts the defense in as much as what Nicholas was talking about was consistent with what other witnesses has testified about as well. And I presume that the prosecution is going to talk about bias, which, and as you know, bias is always an issue with every witness and every person that comes onto the stand to testify in a case. And so it's completely credible that people testify inconsistently with each other, but it's the jury's role to determine facts and the jury's role to determine what they believe actually happened. I believe that they put Nicholas on afterwards for him to confirm that, yes, there were strict rules. Yes, there were a lot of directions, all orchestrated by R. Kelly himself. And there were all of these things that focused on punishments or rules around or repercussions from breaking the rules or not following the directions, again, from R. Kelly. That's what's important here. The other thing that's important is while Nicholas saw some of the same things that the first person testified, the personal assistant testified about, he was very clear and identified that they were young, very young girls. And that's what he noticed. I think that's going to be really important. And since they were talking about the same things, the jury's going to have to choose which one are they going to believe over the other. And I think that will be influenced by the other statements that I heard from other victims. The other thing that I think stood out to me from Nicholas's testimony today was talking about the clandestine behavior from R. Kelly when his wife was around and how they had a process to hide the girls when she came around. The fact that there was this behavior, I think, speaks in large part to how R. Kelly was behaving. And this whole trial has given us a real insight as to what that secret behavior was. I think that the jury is going to find that really interesting and pay attention to it. And that's going to be what they focus on as they try and determine what is actually true and whether or not he's actually guilty of the allegations the prosecution has in front of him.
Now, Paul, Nicholas also talked about how Kelly still had girlfriends around once he was married. Once he was a married man. Now, he said that he would actually have Kelly, or Kelly would actually have his assistant give his wife a note, a piece of paper that would say "important is on the way," and he would hide Kelly's girlfriends. That doesn't address the age of these women, but here the prosecution isn't trying to prove that Kelly was unfaithful. We know that, but just how involved Kelly apparently got his employees in hiding things he didn't want others to see. Talk about the importance of that.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is because that's the kind of stuff that I think juries lean in and they want to hear. This whole time, I think a lot of people like myself and like this jury really wants to know about what is the celebrity like? What is their life like? What kind of things do they do? And it's little details like this that I believe a jury pauses and leans into because they want to hear. Just like the testimony yesterday when they were talking about Aliyah. We all wanted to know, what is the whole thing with Aliyah? Are we ever going to get a different side to that story about observed sexual behavior, observed illegal behavior involving her? And we got that just yesterday. And so now to hear what his wife was doing during all of that time, and this is a question that people have asked throughout this trial as well, and to hear insights there, this is exactly the kind of salacious testimony that I think jurors want to hear, that I think audiences have been listening to. And because they want to know about these other celebrities and about natural questions that we have during testimony in a trial like this, I think that's what the jury focuses on. And those are really dangerous things for a jury to focus on for the defense, because that's what they're paying attention to. And so in addition to having to combat the actual evidence against R. Kelly from an objective perspective, they've got to overcome the heightened attention that jurors are paying to the salacious news and information about the common questions that we all have, like he was married, what was his wife doing during all of this? And for the reason that that is now inserted itself into the trial is what makes it relevant. And I think this is what the jury is juggling as they're trying to decide whether or not R. Kelly is guilty. And, as I said, this is the information that jurors wanted to hear and to have these questions answered. What happened when his wife came around? What did R. Kelly do? Why was he acting in a manner? And if he was with the wife, was he doing it for authorities or for friends of the victims as well, alleged victims?
Now, Paul, prosecutors were also granted permission to share some audio and video recordings. According to court documents, Kelly can be heard accusing a woman of lying to him before assaulting her. This is the first time the jury gets to hear from Kelly thanks to these recordings. Talk about how significant this can be.
Absolutely, because if R. Kelly doesn't get on the stand, the only direct impression of R. Kelly that this jury is going to have for this trial will be this evidence that the prosecution is introducing, showing him angry, showing him making orders, showing him punishing people for not following his rules and directions. That is not a positive light for R. Kelly from defense. And then that's putting pressure on them to have to put on anything else to show a different side of him, to show him as a celebrity, as a nice guy, as a philanthropist, or someone that was trying to help people around him. But I don't know how they're going to get any of that into evidence without putting him on the stand. And I don't think this is a case where I would put him on the stand. I don't expect him to take the stand. But that's why even that little snippet of information of his actual voice talking is relevant, because it's going to be influential for this jury. Again, that's the only verbiage that they have from him, the only present sense impression that they have recorded of him, and it's him executing those rules and directions, which is at the core of this entire case in terms of a racketeering charge, that what he directed, what his rules were in order to benefit illegal behavior.
All right, Paul Henderson, veteran prosecutor and legal contributor. We'll see you later on in the hour.